This LOS is compare characteristics of representative industries from the various economic sectors. For this LOS, I just want to jump right into the ebook, and we can see Exhibit 7 from the reading. It's under the section for industry comparison. So to illustrate how elements might be applied, they uses the factors discussed in the reading to examine three different industries. So the three different industries are branded pharmaceuticals, oil services, and confections and candy. Okay, we're not going to go through this whole thing, but I just want to show you. So they're looking at, first of all, there's a listing of the major companies: branded pharmaceuticals, Pfizer, Novartis, Merck; oil services, Schlumberger, Baker Hughes, Halliburton; and confections or candy, Cadbury, Hershey, Mars, Wrigley, Nestle. So it just goes through the different components here. The barriers to entry, so whether the barriers to entry are very high, medium, or could be low. Talking about the levels of concentration with regards to the industry, whether it's concentrated, whether it's fragmented, or very concentrated. Again, these have impacts on pricing. Impact of industry capacity. NA means not applicable, whether it's medium high, not applicable again with regards to the candy. Industry stability, stable, unstable, very stable. Life cycle, mature, mature, very mature. Price competition, low, medium, high price competition, low price competition. Then it gets into the demographic influences, government and regulatory, social, technological. And then finally, an important thing is whether it's growth versus defensive versus cyclical. And you can see for the branded pharmaceuticals that it is a defensive industry. Demand for most healthcare services does not fluctuate with the economic cycle. With regards to oil services, it's cyclical for sure. We've seen that recently. Demand is highly variable and depends on oil prices, exploration budgets, etc. And for candies, it's defensive. Demand for candy and gum is extremely stable. Good times, people eat candy. Bad times, people eat candy. Okay? So jumping back to my slides now. So now we understand if we're doing an industry comparison from that example we just saw in the text. So we would look at the companies A, B, and C. Now in the example that we saw, we looked at three different industries. And again, some of the things that we would look at as the barriers to entry success, the levels of concentration, impact of industry capacity, the industry stability, the life cycle, price competition, demographic influences, government and regulatory influences, social influences, technological influences, and then finally that last section of growth versus defensive versus cyclical. So you can imagine some questions on the exam, if they're based on this LOS, would be something based on this table. So we'll do a quick practice question. Which of the following is most likely a characteristic of a concentrated industry? A, infrequent tacit coordination; B, difficulty in monitoring other industry members; or C, industry members attempting to avoid competition on price. Okay, like that question, it's a bit of a tricky one. You need to go through and make sure you've got all your little factoids straight. C is correct. The relatively few members of the industry generally try to avoid price competition. So in a concentrated industry means there's few competitors, and they generally try to avoid price competition. Another quick practice question. Which of the following industry characteristics is generally least likely to produce high returns on capital? A, high barriers to entry; B, high degrees of concentration; or C, short lead times to build new plants? Okay, I don't think this question is too difficult. Again, it's looking for the least likely. So when I see the least likely, I'm going to underline it. I'm going to put an F there. I'm looking for the false. Okay, so and then I'm going to read the last part of the sentence. To produce high returns on capital, high barriers of entry. Yeah, that's true, because if there's a high barrier of entry, I've got some pricing power, correct? High degree of concentration. Well, that one might be a bit of a question mark. Because high degree of concentration, that means it's a couple of firms control a lot. But again, I'm going to look at the last one. Again, I might be questioning something, not exactly sure. Then I'm going to read the last one. Short lead times to build new plants? No, if there's a very short lead time to build new plants, that means there's going to be very intense competition. If there's intense competition, it's not likely to produce high returns on capital. So in that case, I know I'm looking for the least likely, I'm looking for the false. I know that C is correct. With short lead times, industry capacity can be rapidly increased to satisfy demand, but it also may lead to overcapacity and lower profits. So a good little question. In that case, I wasn't sure about the second one, whether it was true or false perhaps, but I knew for sure that C is going to be false. High returns on capital from short lead times to build new plants? No, that's the false. Least likely, that's the one I'm looking for. One last quick practice question to finish this LOS. An industry with high barriers to entry and weak pricing power most likely has A, high barriers to exit, B, stable market shares, or C, significant numbers of issued patents. The correct answer on that is A. An industry with high barriers to entry and weak pricing power most likely has high barriers to exit. An industry that has high barriers to entry generally requires substantial physical capital and/or financial investment. With weak pricing power in the industry, finding a buyer for excess capacity, i.e. to exit the industry, may be difficult. And that's the last slide for this LOS. Thank you.